this loft in 1994. At that time, Trudy was living in the apartment adjacent to mine, right on the other side of that wall. She was then married to one of the original developers of this co-op. I have also enjoyed many opportunities over the years to attend Trudy's Manhattan recitals and concerts at venues including St. Peter's Church at Citicorp, Skorka Hall at the National Opera Center on 7th Avenue, and at Old St. Patrick's Church in nearby Nolita. Please join me in welcoming today's guest of honor, Trudy Craney, who will introduce her fellow performer, guitarist Gary Kessler.
First piece is Ridente la Calma, composed by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It's a love song. It's called an art song. And basically it's about a lover trying to calm down the fears and doubts of another lover. Ridente la calma nell'alma si deste. This is very poetic, Baroque poetry. not everyone had gathered in. Gary and I went to the Mannes College of Music together. He started out at Cooper Union and then worked his way over to Mannes. He played for my graduate recital. Then Gary went on to form Trio Sonata with an oboist and a flautist. They toured all over the United States. We have some recordings here, and you were hearing a little bit of one recording as you were milling in. There are some CDs for sale if you love it. They're $15 a CD. Gary decided at a certain point to start a family with Rachel, and they have this amazing family. He is on the faculty at St. David's School, and he is also a wood turner. I don't know, does anybody here know what that is?
No.
I do. He makes the most magnificent bowls from found logs in the 5 boroughs, and when we started rehearsing, he came in with these amazing bowls that had little kind of knots on the side. They were just incredible. So I am just thrilled that Gary has decided to start performing in public again, and that...
You know, I'm not paying you for publicity.
You don't have to.
Thank you.
You need to be able to duplicate a pitch. So, oh, you need to be able to sing. Oh, you need to be able to duplicate that specific pitch. There has to be some kind of quality of sound. Now, clearly, at the age of 11, when I started singing, I did not sound like this. I had a very high, pure voice, no middle voice, and no low voice. It was just this stratospheric, wonderful high voice with no technique. So I grew up in an Italian-Irish family. Everybody had a voice. My mother sang in a chorus. My father was the Irish-American, she was the Italian-American. He sang "O Danny Boy" and "My Wild Irish Rose" while I was doing the dishes. My mother sang the Ella Fitzgerald, the Nat King Cole, the Sarah Vaughan material. This is what we grew up with. One of the first things my father built was a Heath kit, which was a very rudimentary hi-fi. It's about this big. There were 2 speakers on the floor, and I basically sat there for hours listening to whoever I could listen to. So it was jazz, it was Perry Como, Lena Horne, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Sarah Vaughan, Renata Tebaldi, beautiful soprano, Carla Bergonzi, Giuseppe Di Stefano. Then I went on to Leontine Price and Montserrat Caballé, these amazing people. So there's a genetic component, there's a cultural component for sure, and also an overwhelming desire to communicate. I was phenomenally shy as a kid because school really beat me up. I started out being very outgoing, and then I realized I needed to shut my mouth to survive in school. And then when ballet was just too quiet and too solitary, it seemed an art form, I went to singing. I knew when I was 15 that I wanted to be a singer. I started studying voice when I was 11 with a woman named Lois Kerr, wonderful singer. Can't say that she taught me technique, and I think I learned some of her bad habits. Then I went on to the Mannes College of Music and studied with Sebastian Engelberg, who is by far one of the greatest voice teachers on this planet, who had the misfortune of being shooed out of Europe, having started a career as a Jew at the Vienna Staatsoper, and he ran for his life, along with everybody else who was Jewish on the faculty at Mannes College of Music. And we had the privilege of working with these amazing people. So what is vocal technique? Vocal technique is a combination of breathing, pitch duplication, and finding places to resonate. With regard to breath, the closest thing that I could say about what breathing feels like in singing is that it feels like you're inhaling and holding your breath at the same time while putting your foot on a gas pedal of breath and going very slowly. So, for example, right now I'm speaking and inhaling and holding my breath because I don't want my lungs to collapse. So I keep my chest out. Basically the sound, the air is, I'm trying to keep the air in and emit as little as possible. So breath is very important in terms of the way it flows over the vocal cords. This is a breath builder. Even if you're not a singer, I recommend that you go on Amazon and get one of these for 17 bucks. This is how it works. I'm going to take my jacket off so you can see how my back opens out like a sideways accordion, because that's what you need to do. Oh, thank you, Gary. That's really what you need to do to breathe properly with singing, okay? Here we go. that has to stay out like that. So the back stays out, the chest stays up, and that's called the appoggiare. Your appoggiare means to press. You're constantly pumping this kind of oval umbrella to keep it open and go up like this because it really wants to go down, right? And as soon as it goes down, you're depressing the lungs and you have no breath support and no compression. So that tiny emission of air is a compressed stream of air. So I use this to inform me about what the in and out feels like. It's also, none of us breathe enough, so this is really good for people with asthma. So two of the images that I use for my students when they start out is I use the image of the cello as an instrument. So you have this found wood, somebody hones and ages the wood, they make it into a shape, a cavernous shape. They cut a hole in the middle, they string strings over it, and there's this long neck on top. And then you've got the bow. Okay, so the body of a person is the body of a cello. The strings are the vocal cords. And the bow is the breath. It's the breath. So the bow has to bow over those vocal cords, those strings, very gently, and then it vibrates inside the cello. Now, if the cello were to lose its shape and suddenly turn into a banjo, could you give me a C?
You would like this one?
Yeah. So I'm going to sing the opening of Ridente la Calma with what's called a cupola, the stretch here. And then I'm going to sing it without it. Okay? So my chest is up, and this is here. Now, I'm going to drop this and pretend that instead of my being a cello, I'm a banjo. Okay? So that means that all this resonance is going to go away. It's going to sound really funny. So, what is a singer's goal? A singer's goal is to find as many resonating areas as you can. And usually what that is behind the nose. In this area, we have a hard palate and a soft palate. And all that tissue above it needs to be stretched all the time, like a jellyfish going through water. The pharyngeal wall has to be kept open. The larynx needs to go down. This is called the open throat, okay? In the meantime, this has to stay up and out, and you have to push out what I call an imaginary tire around here to support the stretch on top. Otherwise, you lose the stretch, and suddenly you lose the pitch and you lose the breath. So it's pretty complex, and it requires a lot of juggling. And it's like peeling an onion. You do a couple layers and go, oh, I'm getting there, but you just keep peeling and peeling and peeling, and there's so much to learn about singing. It took me really until, I'd say about 10 years ago to consolidate my breathing technique. And I looked and looked for people who knew about breath. And ultimately, with what they gave me and what I did, I taught myself. For a singer, you need to know musical styles, you need to know languages, you need to know movement. The cost of training can be prohibitive. A voice lesson can cost anywhere from $60 to $150 a lesson. A pianist who accompanies you can be anywhere from $50 to $150. Finding a voice teacher can be very challenging, and then when you become very attached to a teacher, because singing is such a personal endeavor, you need to know when to leave that teacher, because they have taught you everything they can. The other image I use before I go on to the second song is sometimes I'll talk about a velvety pipe. Sebastian Engelberg, my teacher at Mannes, he talked about this velvety pipe that's made out of kind of rubber that opens out. So the pipe starts here and it goes all the way down here. And it always has to stay open for singing. For certain things it may not feel as open, but other things it really has to. Yawning is what happens in voice lessons when people are on the right track. I just saw you do that. So I've spent a lot of time looking in the mirror to make sure my uvula is raised, okay, that little thing that hangs down. And behind the uvula is a hole. I've actually stuck my finger up my hole behind my uvula, which goes to here, and that area has to be stretched open really big time, Okay, so those are some of the things, the journeys that singers have. Another thing, lastly, of that pipe that I talked about, sometimes I'll say that the pipe is not, it has a bottom where if you fill it up with something, it won't pour out. So it's a pipe with a bottom. And I say this pipe is really wide and warm and velvety, but it's muscular, it stays open. And I get this big pitcher of air, and I pour it in the pipe. And I infuse the pipe with air all the way down to here. And that's what I sing with. Every day, this is my practice book. I clock in, I clock out. I make drawings of things that worked because I can't exactly put my hands down my throat to stretch something open. I need to know what I'm doing, and this really helps me with my singers. Metaphor and imagery is very important in teaching vocal technique. This next song is by David Leisner. David is a guitarist and a composer, New York City based, fabulous musician, who wrote a number of things for soprano and guitar. He continues to perform as a solo guitarist himself. But this is from his song cycle Confiding, a cycle of 10 songs to poems by women. So this first song, which is the only one we're doing in the cycle, is called Savior, I Have No One Else to Tell, by Emily Dickinson, the poetry. It's not the whole poem, but she was a very spiritual woman who never really stepped foot inside a church much at all, but she was constantly on the journey to understand her spirituality. If I haven't mentioned it, I talked about an overwhelming urge for a singer to say something. There's such a devotion to the act of practicing and the commitment of practicing that if you don't have an overwhelming 150% desire, there's no future for you as a singer. So I really relate to this Dickinson poem because of its spirituality, because I feel whenever I open my mouth, it's an act of prayer. To the Big Bang, to God, to humanity, that's what it is for me.
I am
least some of you.
Very
You know, that's where the mouth and the tongue and the lips really help to create an enunciation, which I used to have terrible diction. It's much better now. You know, the vocal cords create the vowels, and that's why Italian music is so wonderful to learn technique on. A, E, I, O, U. They're not diphthongs. Diphthongs in language like say. The word say, what vowel do you sing on? You sing on the E and then the A. So you give the E 2 beats and the A the 3rd beat. Diphthongs are terrible to sing on. So to really make the words clear for a soprano, which is so much higher, you've got to really work the consonants on the outside and the vowels on the inside. And when you go higher, you can't literally sing the vowels. For example, if I go to a certain vowel, let's say, I can still sing an ah. I go more to an ah, because I'm going into this little space. It's like the big space capsule takes over, the big rocket takes off, and then when they're in space, there's the itty bitty one that takes off. That's what you have to use for the high notes. It's back here, it's a secret chamber, you gotta stretch and point, and you have to make it slimmer. It's called the passaggio in Italian, the passageway. To slim down in those passageways to get to the bloom of another register in the voice. So in terms of my career, my first talent show was 11 years old. I tied with another lady. I sang People Will Say We're in Love, Don't Throw Bouquets at Me, from Showboat. And then I studied with Lois Kerr. I went to the Mannes College of Music, very under-equipped as a musician. A lot of singers are very under-equipped. But I proceeded to learn music theory and sight singing and piano. It's a great education. I studied with Mr. Engelberg until he died. It took me a long time to find Dr. Elizabeth Verenios out of Maryland. I worked with Sebastian about 17 years. I worked with Elizabeth 17 years, and I did some time with Myron McPherson and Anat Kedar. Secretarial work, waitressing. I did everything I could to support myself. There were many, many personal sacrifices. I did not do many things that other people did. I ate chicken wings, I rested, I'd get up in the morning and practice at 8 a.m., I'd go work for 8 hours, I'd go home and practice and fall in bed. And that was my cycle 5 days a week. A lot of sacrifices. And it took me a while to really understand how organized I would need to be successful as a singer, even though there is a component of luck. Which then someone in Connecticut with the Connecticut Grand Opera hired me to sing Musetta from La Bohème by Puccini. And in the meantime, he had lost his Lucia di Lammermoor, which is a Donizetti opera based on Sir Walter Scott's novel, The Bride of Lammermoor, based on a true story about a young noblewoman who's betrothed to someone where they broke a gold coin, which in those days in the 1500s was tantamount to getting married. And her parents made her marry someone else. So she died from madness. So Donizetti was so moved by this that he set this to music. So in any case, I had been studying the role. I just happened to have been studying the role for 6 years because I knew if I ever got hired, that 35-minute mad scene where I have to go mad over a period of 35 minutes and then end it with high E flats, which I'm not going to sing today, but they're really high, that I need to be ready. It happened that when they said, our Patricia Wise from the Vienna Staatsoper is sick, can you sing rehearsals? I said, sure. So I fell on my knees. I prayed to my grandmother who had died like 7 years before, who was the love of my life. I said, Nanny, you got to help me out. I got this job. I'm so scared. She helped me out. So that launched my career. I made my debut as Lucia. I got international press. Houston Grand Opera read the reviews. They picked me up to audition as Madame Mao from John Adams' opera, Nixon in China. And that began my international career, really, even though I had done some stuff in Europe. And I sang the role of Madame Mao, which was probably the nastiest, most challenging role, except for the Queen of the Night, that I've ever sung. It was wonderful. I learned a lot about the history of China, and I got to work with some great people, Peter Sellers, Mark Morris, Kent Nagano. These are, real major people in the world, Edo Devar, in the world of opera. So what happened was when I made my debut in Frankfurt, Teddy was 2 months old, so we went over in the plane, and everybody was just nuts over our new son. We came back a year later, and Teddy was a year old, and I was doing the same performances, and he was walking at that point. It was very exciting. When Teddy was 6, Wouter died unexpectedly of a horrible surgery that went really kaflooey, and we were heartbroken. I didn't think I would ever sing again, and all my musicians friends called me up about once every week and said, "Can I come over and hold your hand so you'll sing a vocalese, just sing a couple notes?" And I just couldn't do it. I absolutely could not do it. And then I had this dream, and I was in a very white room walking down a corridor. And I'd be crying at night, pulling it together during the day. You have a 6-year-old son who's never going to see his father again. You're only 46 years old and you're a widow. It's a big deal. I was walking through this room, and there was this kind of energy coming out of my heart, and this kind of urge to sing. And it made me walk faster and faster in this corridor, and then suddenly I realized Wouter was right next to me. He said, "You gotta sing, you gotta sing, you gotta sing." So by the time I was down this corridor, I was in full voice singing. And that was Wouter's message to me, that I needed to sing. And it turned out that my voice teacher, Elizabeth Vrenios, major talent. Her son went down in a Lockerbie crash. He was a Syracuse University student. And I had been working with her, I don't know how many years by the time Wouter died in '98. And I went to in one of my first lessons, and she said, 2 things. Right now, you don't have to believe me, because you're so sorrowful, but your joy is going to be so much deeper because of your sorrow. Your capacity for joy is going to be so much deeper. So during that lesson, I'm singing this high B flat. She said, "You're singing in the sorrow. You need to move over to joy. It's right next to it. They live right next to each other. Sing in the joy." Interesting, huh? Very interesting. So plan B was that I did not want to leave Teddy and hire people to take care of him and sing. I was just re-emerging off the mommy track. I had contracts all over the place, canceled them all. I did not want to sing yet. I was just too upset. And I started teaching singing, which was something I wanted to do, but I didn't think I was quite ready, that I didn't know enough. But it turned out that I really wasn't hurting anyone, that they were learning from me. And then I started singing oratorio locally, and I formed some chamber ensembles that I could sing at. And then I went for my master's degree at Hunter College in music, thinking I might want to get a faculty position, but I changed my mind about that. Decided I would just teach privately. Then in the midst of this, Teddy's education, our becoming a different family, just us and the 3 French bulldogs, I met Alan Feldman, which is my husband right over there. We got married 4 years ago. And he has been an amazing force of love and joy and encouragement in my life and in Teddy's life. And he has a beautiful voice, actually. He's got a really pretty voice, and he sings on pitch, thank God. So now I'm at a point, 65 years old, a mature artist. What's the difference in terms of vocal hygiene? Very big deal. When I was in my 30s, I would do pulmonary blow tests. I had the pulmonary function of Lance Armstrong. It was 96. That's the kind of lungs I had. Now it's 75, 79. So that's why I use this. I do spin class, and I have to constantly talk to my ear and say, come on. It's like the fountain at Lincoln Center. Imagine a big light beach ball on it when it's pushing up the air. That's what breath support feels like. It's always got to be moving. It's like a teeny amount, but it's always got to be moving. And it's like you've got all these umbrellas that keep reopening in your body. You've got to constantly work it. And as a much more knowledgeable singer, I know a lot about vocal technique now, and I'm a really good voice teacher. I've got this aging body. So I take hormone replacement therapy. I would really protect myself from hearing loss. So many places are way too loud. I do not go to a concert or a dance, like a rock, Halloween, without earplugs. I leave places that are too loud. I put my fingers on my ears with the subway, and I encourage everyone else to do that. My practice regime, I sign in. I try to make the first thing I do in the morning. Usually I practice an hour, and then I'll have another attachment of some more practicing. That's separate from memorization. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline, being a professional musician. It's like being an Olympic athlete, really. And I think it's been hard on some of the people who love me because I've not been able to spend as much time with them because of this priority. And it can be annoying, you know. You know, if you're singing a role like the Queen of the Night on stage or Madame Mao mixing in China, you know that emergencies are going to happen. Someone's not going to come in on time. The trap door that brings me up for the Queen of the Night's one aria is going to break, and the smoke machine is going to overproduce, and you won't be able to see Tamino. I mean, so many things happen. The scrim can fall down on you. All these things have happened. So you have to be so prepared that even if a wall fell down, you could keep going. And that's why there's so much planning. You know, how soon do I get here before I have to sing? What do I eat the night before? What time do I go to bed? It's even a 3-week backup if it's a really big role. There has to be a lot of planning. So those are the things that one learns, which I think for anybody who's really good at what they do and they love what they do, they have that overview of how they have to plan. But something as physically demanding as this requires a lot of attention. I think that's pretty much it. So if you turn to the next page, there's a Granados song, Spanish composer, called El Majo Discreto, the discreet Majo. A Majo still might actually exist in Madrid and maybe other parts of Spain, was a dandy. He dressed up, he was not very wealthy, and it came from a certain district in Madrid. And here I have made a copy of what's called IPA, International Phonetics Association. These are symbols that tell me what the pronunciation would be, because there are th and zhs and all kinds of things with Castilian Spanish that don't exist in English. So I thought you would enjoy that. So the dark printing is the actual poetry, and then underneath is the IPA, and then underneath that is the words of the translation. So basically, this woman is saying, they say that my Majo is feo, he's really ugly. It could be possible that he's ugly. But when you fall in love, love is so blind that you don't even notice. That's pretty much what she says. And then she says, let me see, but if it is that my man is not someone that everybody would seek because he's so good looking, the one thing that he is that he's very discreet. And for me, that's really important. So I just thought this was so adorable. And that he's faithful. She knows he's discreet and that he's faithful. And then on the third page, she says, what is the secret that he's holding? She says, I'm not going to say anything. But apparently these two really get it on. That's my sense, that they really have a great time with one another, and that she thinks he's just a cat's meow.